Paid $180,000 for Beholder as a yearling. We paid $180,000 for Into Mischief at a 2-year-old in training sale. And, I wish I could sit here and tell you we knew what he was going to turn into when we bought him, but that would be a really big lie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Off the Track podcast, daily racing forum interview series where we go beyond the past performances and the handicapping. This week, our special guest was the general manager of Spendthrift Farms, Ned Toffey. You've probably heard the name Ted Toffey in the news recently, Grade 1 winner and at the top of the juvenile division right now. We spoke with Ned all about the current runners for Spendthrift Farms, and there are some good ones at the moment. And then we went back in time, talked all about the history of Spendthrift Farms, how Ned was able to come over to Spendthrift Farms, talking about the relationship with Hughes, all the great horses that Ned has been around at Spendthrift Farms, like Beholder and Authentic. It was a fantastic conversation. We probably could have talked for a whole hour more with Ned Toffey, general manager of Spendthrift Farms. Very excited to be speaking with the general manager of Spendthrift Farm, the 2024 Farm Manager of the Year, Ned Toffey. Ned, did they give you like a belt that you get to walk around with, like a championship belt for that?
No, I got to do a lot of fundraising, though.
So my first question for you, Ned, I mean, as a GM of a huge farm like Spendthrift, where you've got a racing division of horses and a stallion roster at a farm, how do you do it? How do you manage so many things at once?
Well, I would say that the two biggest things are, number one, we have wonderful ownership here, and that started with Hughes all the way back in 2004. I've been here 21 years now, and now continues with his son-in-law Eric Gustafson and his daughter Tamara Gustafson. Just great people and very committed to continuing what Wayne and what all of us got started. And so they've really carried on beautifully since he stepped aside and then passed away. And then the other is that over the years, we've been able to build just, we think, a great team. And, I don't care how good you are, no matter what you do, you've got to have good people around you. And I think we've been able to build a really good group of people, and that's something we're really, really proud of. So all credit to the ownership and to the team.
Hey, you can find out more about all those individuals too at spendthriftfarm.com. And I know I'm going to do it at least once or twice. I know I'm going to call you Ted Toffey once or twice because that's the name that is out there right now that everybody's seen. And that Grade 1 winner is set to run this weekend coming up in the Grade 1 Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland. I'm sure you've told this story a few hundred times by now, but we'll ask you once again. So how did this all come about with the horse named Ted Toffey?
Well, since you referenced the Farm Manager of the Year, it was actually an interview I did with one of the trade journals about that award, and they teased the article or the issue that article was going to appear in, saying check out our next issue with XYZ and an interview with Spendthrift's Ted Toffey. So it was just a really pretty harmless Twitter typo. My daughter got hold of it. She was talking about it. She responded back to them and said, "So close." Actually, somebody else asked me. I wasn't even aware that this tweet had gone out. So I had zero context. And a friend of mine texted me and said, "Can we name a horse Ted Toffey?" So I had no idea what the heck they were talking about. And I replied, and I don't know if it's appropriate to say that, but I replied, "Nuck foe." So I'll let you do the math there. But anyway, that I think was my son. I'm not sure if it was my son or daughter, but one of them showed it to Eric Gustafson that owns the farm. And Eric has a great sense of humor. He has a lot of fun with the naming of the horses. And And he said, "Oh, we're naming a horse that," and that all unbeknownst to me. So I'm just, this goes by, several months later. I'm checking workouts, and because I think this happened like in March or something, and now here it is. I don't know, June or July or something like that, and I'm checking workouts, and I see this Ted Toffey breezed 47 change or something. And I'm, what the heck? So I had no idea it was coming. No, it was not my idea. Somebody asked me if I named the horse. I said, absolutely not. But anyway, I totally underestimated how much fun people would have with it. And people have been great, and they're, rooting for the horse, which is nice that at least they're not rooting against him for the most part. There's probably a few, but it's been, I underestimated the reaction and how much fun people would have with it, and I think that's a great thing.
You gotta have a sense of humor in this game, right? With
yeah,
day in, day out, and it can be such a tough game. But
it is.
It makes it easier when you have the really good horses, right? And this horse has been incredible so far in his first two starts. So what do you remember about him early on, or maybe like the first times? Was there a moment when you got the?
Well, I don't know if there was a moment where we said, "Oh, gee, he's going to be this." I think that moment
Yeah.
was across the finish line in the hopeful. Um, but I remember we go on yearling inspections every year, and we were at TaylorMade Farm, where he was bred and raised, and of course he's by our stallion Into Mischief, but he was raised at TaylorMade Farm, and we ahead of this Keeneland September sale, we'll routinely go out to the farms and try to get a little head start on looking at horses, and so he was just in the group that we saw when we went there. And my first thought was, is this horse too obvious? Because he was a stunning looking yearling. I've said this to a few people, and people seem to tend to agree. Because he's a gray or roan, and there's not that many Into Mischiefs that have been colored that way. And Into Mischief's pretty consistent about stamping, particularly from a marking standpoint, stamping his offspring. So this guy was a little atypical from a coat color standpoint, but he was such a good looking horse. We thought, we can't let that bother us. And I think it may have bothered other people because he certainly wasn't cheap, but in relative terms, he probably was a bargain. Certainly now, but even at the time, we paid $650 for him, which is a lot of money. But for an Into Mischief yearling to be that nice looking, we felt like we got him. We did not have to pay. I know Frank Taylor told me that they sat there in the pavilion, sort of befuddled, looking around, going, "Is that it?" So we were very tickled to get him for what we got him for. And when he was down in Ocala being broken, I thought he was a standout there. You never really know from that because all you're doing is galloping in a few very, very short breezes, and they don't run many 2 furlong races. So all you can do is start to get a feel for what you think you might have, and everything was really positive on him. It's not always the case on every horse, and sometimes you think you've got a buzzsaw, and it turns out not to be the case. He looked. I thought he very much looked the part in terms of the way he developed physically and the way he moved around in that earliest stage of his training, and we were, really tickled that's turned out to be the case.
He looks very good on paper this weekend. I mean, how do you feel about his chances, and what have you heard about his training going into the race?
Yeah, Todd's been very positive about him, so I feel good about his chances. Obviously, like a lot of the horses, not all of them, but a lot of the horses in there, we've got the horse has spent, from the time he left Ocala, he's been in Saratoga, and he's walked across the street twice and run really well. This time he had a long ship down from Saratoga for this race. He's in new surroundings. He'll be on a new surface, and he'll be up against probably a little bit better competition, and he's going to have to go 2 turns. So there's a lot of questions to answer. I think the good things is that he's a nice sized, scopy, athletic horse. He certainly has the look of a horse that can stretch out. He's a very good-minded horse. He's very laid back. He takes things in stride. So I think that bodes well for a horse's chances to stretch out. He's not going to sort of stress himself out of winning the race. So I think he's certainly got a good shot. There's, on paper, yes, he certainly looks very strong, but again, they're going 2 turns, and there's some other very nice horses in the race that people are excited about. So hopefully he'll do the job, but we'll find out Saturday.
He's not the only big horse that you have running this weekend. Another young one, too. Tommy Joe, the 2-year-old filly. She's going to be running this weekend at Keeneland. She's 2 for 2. She's also a Grade 1 winner. What can you tell us about her and how she's doing heading into the next big race?
A nice thing to have in common is they're both by Into Mischief, so that's a
right
bonus.
Homebreds there, yeah.
The fact that she's a homebred is really, really special. I think most people that do this, especially if you've spent a lot of time on the farms, there's just something about racing a homebred and having some success with a homebred that's just really hard to beat, because it incorporates every aspect of our organization. Everything that we're doing here comes into play, or has some point come into play in terms of getting this filly to where she is. So it just professionally, it's really, really gratifying to have a homebred do well. And we root probably almost as hard for the ones that we've raised and sold as much as the ones that we've got an interest in. So the fact that it's by Into Mischief and out of a mare that a few years back we made a pretty substantial investment, to say the least, in our broodmare band. This mare was one of those mares that we ended up paid a lot of money for, but that we thought that they were, it was a group of mares. It was the kind of mares that bred Into Mischief and some of the other top stallions around could get us some major horses. And so it's nice for that to see that start to pay off.
You have one more filly who is the very top of the division, in the filly and mare sprint division. She's one of the better older fillies right now. She's a 4-year-old, and she is a multiple Grade 1 winner. How is Copian doing, pointing to the Breeders' Cup race coming up in just over a month?
Yeah, she's doing really, really well. Richard's really happy with her. He toyed around with running her this coming weekend. She's run so well fresh. And I don't know, we may have outthought ourselves a little bit. We had sort of had the intention to just keep her on a sprint track, course, maybe bring her to Saratoga. And there really weren't a lot of options. And we started looking at trying to stretch her out. And so it sort of fouled things up a little bit. And she didn't, things didn't unfold quite the way we would like. And we just basically decided to go back to what we know she does best, and so she'll go into the Breeders' Cup filly and mare sprint, and she'll just train up to that. But she's doing extremely, extremely well. So very happy with her.
I want to go back in time a little bit and talk some about your history. I always like asking people, how do you initially get involved in horse racing when you're young? Like, is it with your family taking you to the track, or what got the horse racing bug in for you?
Yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, as a very young kid, I was just always interested in horses, and I was kind of the annoying kid who talked my parents into us having a couple of just old geldings, mixed breed horses that we had in a barn by our house and knocked around on as a kid. But I was a fan of racing for as long as I can remember. And I actually grew up in a little town called Great Barrington, which some people will remember the Great Barrington Fair, which was the home of some really bad racing. It was bottom of the barrel, but it was racing. And it's about an hour and 20 minutes from Saratoga. So, 1974, my dad took me to Saratoga. It happened to be the day they were inducting Secretariat into the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And so I just always had this, I was always a fan of horses, horse racing, and followed it, kind of grew away from it a little bit through high school and college. And actually in college, I had a roommate. A lot of people were familiar with the name Manganero. There was a number of members of the Manganaro family that have been in the breeding and racing industry. And Paul Manganaro was just by chance, was a roommate of mine in college. We actually played football together at UMass, which at the time was pretty good 1AA football. They're now perennially the worst team in Division One. They
Yes.
should have sort of stayed where they belonged in that a notch below. You're never going to hear me brag about my football playing days, but we had a lot of fun. And I met Paul, and through Paul, I really got to begin to get familiar with the breeding side of the industry, and kind of some of the workings. And I graduated. I graduated from UMass and wasn't really quite sure what I wanted to do. And while I was sort of interviewing for some different jobs, I took a job on a breeding farm in New York State, in Old Chatham, New York. And I thought, well, I'll enjoy this while I look for a real job. And a year later, I moved to Kentucky and worked for a horse farm down there, a place called Brookdale Farm, and which is owned by the Seitz family, which a number of the Seitzes are still, well, the farm is still in operation, and the Seitz are still running it, and a number of Seitz is involved in various aspects of the industry. So, it kind of went on from there. And I met Wayne Hughes when I was a broodmare manager at Three Chimneys Farm. And he asked me if I was interested in running a farm. He was thinking about buying one, and I never dreamed it would be Spendthrift. But he came to town one day, told me he bought Spendthrift, and we were able to work out a deal. And that was in 2004, and I've been here ever since. So
Spendthrift is such a unique farm too, because it has this incredible history all before you even are able to come around too, right? Like leading back, what are some of the like historical, some of the big horses that were, early at putting Spendthrift on the map? If you want to let us know, I know you're a history buff and you can tell, because it's incredible when you look up the lineage of all of the amazing horses that have been through the stalls, through the barns, at the farms there through the years.
It really is incredible. And it goes all the way back, from the namesake was a horse named Spendthrift. The Myrtlewood Stakes is run at Keeneland, and somebody was asking me about that. And, Myrtlewood was bred by Brownell Combs, who was the uncle of Leslie Combs, who started Spendthrift Farm. But, if you go back to Nashua, there's a statue of Nashua in our courtyard at our stallion barn, and he was the first horse syndicated for over $1 million. This was 1955, so you can imagine what that translates to today, 15, 16, $17 million. But he stood at stud here, and then a number of others. I think prior to us being here, there's 8 or 9 Kentucky Derby winners. Seattle Slew and Affirmed were both retired to stud here in consecutive years. So they really were sort of the New York Yankees. It was kind of a murderer's row lineup of the stallion game. And Leslie Combs was a real trendsetter. He did a lot of innovative things. The tax laws changed and people's investments changed, and they went under, and a number of different owners came in here over the years before Wayne Hughes came in. And the great thing was Wayne was a guy that had the resources to begin to put the farm back to what it was. And, we've gradually been able to, I think, make a pretty worthy contribution to the history of Spendthrift.
What do you remember about some of those early conversations with B. Wayne when he brings you over and you're looking at this farm that he's going to purchase? Was there an immediate goal, or what were some of those early talks like with him?
Well, it was very interesting. I think Wayne was a remarkable man and a remarkable businessman, and he told me many, many times, and he would tell you if he was here today, he just wanted a place for his grandkids to come and be out in the country and kind of have a country background like he came from. And literally, he said to me one day, "Well, we've got this stallion complex. I guess we ought to do something with it." And so that turned into, we started off standing one $5,000 stallion, a horse named Teton Forest, who was the son of forestry that Mr. Hughes had bought as a yearling, raced him. He was, I think, a grade 2 winner. So we started with one $5,000 stallion, and it gradually built up over the years. And prior to that, he had dabbled in the stallion industry because he had horses like Malibu Moon and a few others that got a shot at stud. Of course, Malibu Moon, it turned out to be a pretty strong horse. Um, uh, but it is something that he kind of backed into. But I think it came along at a point in his life where he was beginning to step away from the running of public storage. And he was a guy with incredible energy, and he always wanted a project. I think it was impossible for his mind to remain idle. He was always thinking, always trying to come up with something. And so this was sort of a perfect project for him. And so we sort of set about, trying to refurbish the facilities from the physical side, and then gradually began to get into restoring the stallion complex and adding some stallions. And I think the more he did that, the more he enjoyed that. And over the years, he began to realize too, we probably needed to make an investment in the broodmare band. And he that was kind of right around where the time the transition was taking place. He was beginning to step away, and he got more involved with my racehorse at that point, and began to step away from Spendthrift and hand things over to Tammy and Eric. And that's kind of right around the time we made a really big investment in the broodmare band. But by then the stallion operation was kind of up and running, and so it was really an exciting thing to be a part of. But it didn't quite start the way someone might think. Really, sort of backed into the whole thing.
Feel like he's someone we could spend an entire hour-long podcast talking about the great stories and all the things you hear about him. Anything else that you remember about him and how impactful he was overall to kind of shaping what Spendthrift is today?
Well, I think all of us, and a lot of us are still here. We've been fortunate to have very little turnover here at Spendthrift over the years. And I think any of us that have been here will tell you that working for Wayne is really a life-changing experience, because you just, being around somebody like that who was dirt poor as a child, was a highly ethical guy, incredibly hard worker, and very, very sharp, really innovative. We just all learned so much from being around him. And there's hardly a day goes by. I now sort of refer to them as Wayneisms. And I think about the different things he would say. And if he thought things were a little too quiet, he'd come in and say, let's get going, let's make some mistakes today. And the idea was, we're not, even if we make mistakes, activity, doing something, moving forward was better than inactivity. So it was those kinds of things that was really just a remarkable thing to be around.
For where you are now, how have things changed through the years for you as the GM of this farm? You were kind of hitting on it a little bit, more of an emphasis now on breeding versus racing. You were bringing in the broodmare band. How have things kind of shifted for you in the time where, you came in and it maybe was a little more racing centric, and then you said things sort of changed around, right?
Yeah, although I think we're really getting back, the racing numbers are starting to go back up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And the quality for sure right now.
And we're partnering. It was something that started to happen with Wayne and has really continued with Tammy and Eric, is we're on the racehorses, whether we're buying 2-year-olds or yearlings, we're partnering on a lot of horses. And it's, that's just sort of an understanding of the fact that you need a lot of opportunities to get those really good horses.
And have your feelings on that changed on partnerships? Because it seems like that's the last 10, 15 years. We've just been seeing much more of that. And is that something that you were doing years back?
I think we did less of it in the early days under Wayne. And then over time, we began to do a little bit more. And I think we do more and more now. And we don't do it on every horse. And it's sort of a chaotic process, because there's a lot of people that have the same approach, but you're we've done deals where you go in with the intention of saying, here's the budget, and let's buy X number of colts and see how that works out. We've also done it where we're scrambling around at the sale saying, hey, who wants to partner on this one? Or they're asking us if we want to partner on a horse. So it can get a little bit chaotic, and it gets sort of thrown together sometimes at the very last minute. But that's been something we've done more and more of, and it just you're trying to get a piece of good horses because it is, excuse me, it's a very expensive proposition buying stallion prospects. So if you've got a piece of one before they get to that point, you can at least get yourself a little bit ahead of the game. I think the other thing that happened from the time I was first here is I was probably a little bit more hands-on. I'm a broodmare manager by trade, and most of my experience is on the farm side of things. So we were really doing a lot of rebuilding the farm, developing the farm. I was probably a little more hands-on with the day-to-day physical management of the horses. As we've gotten bigger and I've gotten spread a little bit thinner, and I do more now with the racing than I originally did. So I've had to step back, but fortunately we have a really, really good, as I mentioned earlier, just a really good staff, and so I'm able to rely on them more and more. And I'm spread thin, but I've become very comfortable with that because we do have such a good staff here.
Wanted to talk about some of the great Spendthrift horses through the years. Beholder, going to start out with one of the all-time greats. She was so good at racing in her career on track. What was that experience like with an animal that was good early and was able to sustain that level of greatness for her entire career? She's winning juvenile races, and then she's winning distaffs to close out her career. There's very few horses that are like that are so brilliant from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, so grade 1 from age 2 all the way through and including age 6 every year. I don't know if another, now I've heard people say there was somebody back in the 60s or 70s, but I don't know of another horse that's done that, which is it's a credit to her. It's a credit to Mr. Hughes and his management, very much a credit to Richard Mandela and how he managed her career. And it's again a credit to Beholder that that whether there's another one that's done it, it's as difficult it is to come up with the name, illustrates how tough of a thing that is. It is to do. But again, I think it's good management, patient handling, certainly some luck. But just a remarkable mare to be around, and you couldn't build a better looking horse. Her getting to watch her run, and each year sort of beginning to appreciate more and more that we were not just dealing with a nice filly, but dealing with something really exceptional. And the Breeders' Cup Classic with her, she went out with a great win over Songbird. But for me, the Pacific Classic the year before was just that was just as good as it gets. I'll never forget that move. I still remember Gary's comment when they asked him what it was like at the 3/8 pole when he asked her to run, and he said, "I didn't ask her. She just took off on her own." So she was really, really special. And when you think about the kind of the historic place that she occupies in the breed from a racing standpoint, and now as a broodmare. And it really is sort of reminiscent, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the generations, because she's sort of our era's Myrtlewood. And let's hope that continues. Myrtlewood, it took generations to appreciate what an influence she has been on the breed. So hopefully decades from now, I don't think it'll be me, but somebody will be talking about Beholder's influence on the breed. So
because it's so difficult in this game to excel on the track or excel in the breeding shed, and so few do both. And we've already seen her with a grade 1 winning daughter, Tamara, who's
Yeah.
actually, she's going to be making her return to the races too. She was so good early in her career.
Yeah.
She's had a hiccups here and there. How is she doing coming back to race soon?
She's doing really well. We thought we had her back ready to run, and she kicked the rail coming off the track one morning, and was a little lame after that, and there was some stuff to clean up there surgically, so that was another setback. But Richard's been really happy how she's come through all this and how she's been training. He's been looking for a while for an allowance race for her, but those just haven't been able to get anything to fill. So she'll go into this stake off a very long layoff, but she's been training very well, and hopefully she can sneak into the Breeders' Cup filly and mare sprint off of this.
And did I see that earlier this year we had a Beholder Gun Runner baby?
We do. We've got it's really, I think this is always tricky to do when you have these big pedigrees. You try to look at them objectively and not think about who their parents are. But he's arguably one of the best foals we have on the farm, physically, and he is one of the best foals that she has thrown so far. She actually has a Jackie's Warrior filly, a yearling filly that we just shipped down to Ocala to be broken. And I would say she was the best individual that Beholder had thrown. And this colt is beginning to shape up where he may give her a run for her money as the best, at least physical. Now, how that translates into athleticism, we'll find out. But really excited about him and his chances.
Now I want to ask you about another one of the great success stories that you guys have had. Kentucky Derby winner, Authentic. But how unique, strange, different was it winning the Kentucky Derby in 2020, the year where the races were out of order? It was the year where COVID hits the world. Everything's changing. People can't go anywhere. What was that experience like, winning the biggest race, but then kind of doing it in a different type of circumstance?
It was a remarkable experience for so many reasons. One, we had a meeting with my racehorse. Maybe it was a year before this, and Wayne Hughes said, "You guys have a great idea. You just need better horses." And typical Wayne, that here it is. Within a year, he's managed to help them get a Derby horse and then a Derby winner. So he sort of solved that problem. But there was a lot of the stories that came from my racehorse, from people who had bought a micro share and were sort of shut in by COVID and had nothing else to look forward to other than watching this horse race. And so that was really a special experience. And there was so many wonderful stories that people who bought micro shares as gifts for family or friends, and hearing their experiences with it. So that was remarkable. The other thing that was remarkable was that we had a very nice colt named Thousand Words who was in the same Derby, who reared up in the post parade, flipped over backwards, was absolutely fine. But the reality is they have to scratch a horse when he does that. There's no way to know for sure if they've done any damage. He did not, but you can't argue with the rule to scratch them when they do that. So here we were 20 minutes before post time, and we've got two horses in the Derby, and all of a sudden we've got one.
And all the work it takes you to get there with that horse too, right?
We paid a lot of money for him as a yearling. He's even to this day here at the farm, he's as beautiful a stallion as we have on the farm. He was a wonderful racehorse. He's actually been a very solid sire for us. But to suddenly to get to that point and suddenly, and a lot of us kind of thought going in he was our better shot, that he would handle a mile and a quarter, and there was some doubt about that at that point in Authentic's career, which he obviously put those fears to rest pretty well. But some of us thought he, 1,000 words was the better of our two chances going in, and all of a sudden he's out. You throw in COVID and the fact that a place that accommodates 170,000 has something like 2,500 or 5,000 people in it. It is truly a cavernous place when it's empty, Churchill Downs, and it was just the strangest thing. I remember Bob Baffert saying, it felt nothing like the Derby until the gates opened. And suddenly when the gates opened, you forgot about everything. And it suddenly felt like the Derby again. And, as somebody who was closely involved with Authentic, we obviously were rooting for him. And I still love hearing the call because the race caller clearly thought that Tisdalaw was going to go right on by, as a lot of people did, and it was a lot of fun to hear Authentic thwart that, watch him thwart that, and again just ran a remarkable race. And the other thing that stuck out about that is I had a conversation with Bob, if you remember Authentic's Haskell, where he got out to a very comfortable lead. And it looked like he would just coast home, and then he nearly got run down by New York traffic. And I had a conversation with Bob and said, how do you manage this? How do we work around this? And I said, what's the answer? And he sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know, better competition. And he just felt like that if horses came to him sooner, he would dig in, he would respond. And it turned out to be prophetic because Tisdalaw came to him at the top of the stretch. And I think that was a pattern you saw in Authentic's career. If he sat off horses and you tried to make a run with him, he just didn't, for whatever reason, did not do that well. But if you put him on the lead and let him roll, he was almost impossible to get by in the stretch. And so he was, it was sort of prophetic on Bob's part. And so it was incredible to watch that play out the way that it did. And I thought, my goodness, he was exactly right. It just took better competition, and Authentic responded at the top of the stretch instead of deciding to respond, 100 yards from the finish line. And so, that was an incredible experience. And, again, totally surreal. Eric Gustafson and I were there, and with a few others representing the farm. I was always very sad for me. I was, professionally, the great thing about that experience was that we were able to get Wayne a Kentucky Derby. And I think that was what it meant most to all of us about it, was getting Wayne a Derby. And unfortunately, because of concerns with COVID and some of the other drama going on, he stayed back in Lexington and watched it on TV. He wasn't there. Eric Gustafson and I and some others from the farm were there. And Eric, when we had to, went across the track into the infield for the celebration, Eric tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come on, let's go." And, I find myself up there and at one point holding the trophy. And that was, we use the word surreal all the time, but that was truly surreal to look at this trophy that from the time I was a kid knew what that trophy looked like. That the image of that had always been sort of etched in my mind. And so to be standing there holding that was pretty, like I said, surreal is the word. And just a great experience.
Finished off the career with a Breeders' Cup Classic victory. He was a fantastic horse. But I want to get next to the big boy, Into Mischief, who is now the 6-time reigning champion general sire in North America. And what's so impressive to me is that it's not that he's just winning. It's like he is dominating when you look at the difference between first and second in a lot of these categories. And over every black type winners, graded stakes winners, grade 1 winners, like, pour on about him all you want, because he's unlike much that we see out there.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable experience. I think one of the great ironies, he's Beholder's half brother, We paid $180,000 for Beholder as a yearling. We paid $180,000 for Into Mischief at a 2-year-old in training sale. And, I wish I could sit here and tell you we knew what he was going to turn into when we bought him, but that would be a really big lie. He's just a remarkable horse, and he was a very talented racehorse.
Yep.
If you look at his race record, you might think he was unsound. He really wasn't. He had just a very oddball foot issue that kept him out of his most of his 3-year-old year. It was not something that I would think of as a traditional unsoundness. It was just sort of an oddball thing. But he was not an unsound horse at all. He's really quite sound. A very talented racehorse, grade 1 winner at 2. But he came to stud, and people were just not impressed with him physically. We struggled to get mares to him in his first several years. And then that first crop got to the races, and he's got 2 horses in the Kentucky Derby. And all of the guys that really grind on this, the numbers crunchers, really began to start talking about his incredible percentages as a sire, even off of these very low numbers. And as the numbers began to improve, the percentages didn't really fall off that much. And I think that's one of the things that sets him apart, is that he's not only can he get you these grade 1, no sire has sired more Derby winners than he has. He can get you, the elite horses. Some stands get you that, or they get you a dud. Into Mischief gets you that, or he gets you a solid, useful horse. There's not very many that you can't do something with. And so I think that consistency is what's helped him put so much distance between him and so many of these other sires over the years. He gets the home runs, but he gets a lot of singles and doubles as well. And so he's really been remarkable from that standpoint. He's probably the best breeding horse I've ever been around. I've told this story before, but the first time, we start these stallions off with a test mare, a mare that's sort of bomb-proof. They're not going to get excited. They're not going to be bothered by a stallion trying to figure out how to mount them and breed. And the first test mare we put in front of Into Mischief, he walked up behind her, paused, and bred her. And that was sort of a
sign.
Shadowing of what's to come. He's an incredibly efficient breeder. It's very easy for him to breed. The only time Into Mischief the only drama around him is when he doesn't get to go breed. He gets really mad if other stallions go to the breeding shed for a mare, and if he doesn't have one on his schedule that day or that session, he gets really mad. So he's a horse that does best if you can kind of keep him busy, and his fertility and his libido is kind of unmatched. But he's just been doing it so well for so long, and a lot of horses do well with those inexpensive mares that they get, because he was a $12,500 stud fee his first year, and dropped down to $6,500, and we probably did some deals for less than that in the next couple of years. And so you can imagine that's not the strongest group of mares. And some stallions, as the mare quality goes up, the results don't follow. But with Into Mischief, as the mare quality's gone up, the results have only continued to improve. And so he's done it with lesser mares. He's done it with more and more quality, and he just continues to get the job done. He's really he's a remarkable horse, and can't really say enough about him. But he's going to have a lasting influence on this breed, and again, just it's an incredible experience to be part of it. And I can remember Mr. Hughes saying, "I think we might have the next Bold Ruler on our hands." And I remember sort of chuckling to myself and thinking, well, that couldn't. And now here we are, a year or so away from tying Bold. I think Bold Ruler was 8 years consecutive leading sire, and 7 or 8. And Into Mischief, I would say, has a stranglehold already on number 7 this year. So he's got 6 in the bag. He's working on number 7, and the incredible stat is that to go back to a horse that's done that, the last horse is Bold Ruler. That was in the 1960s, and then I think one crop in the 70s where he was leading sire. Prior to that, you have to go back to the horse Lexington, which was the 1870s. So that puts him in that's pretty significant historical context for what Into Mischief has done, and so just can't say enough about him, and he's at a point he owes us nothing. He'll continue to breed mares for us and do his job, and as long as he's able, and when he's not, then hopefully we'll have some of these sons ready to step in and take the place.
And what was so impressive as I'm prepping for this chat with you, I'm like, okay, I'll pick out one or two of these newer sires to talk a little bit about. It's like, 2023, the 4 stallions that finished 1, 2, 3, 4 on the freshman sire list, all in a single year: Maximus Mischief, Matoli, Omaha Beach, Vino Rosso. How about Vacoma, Yaupon? I mean, you are having some incredible success, not only with Into Mischief, but with some of these newer, younger sires in an era where it seems like there's a lot of pressure for these horses to produce quality horses right away, right? That's what, if they're not doing it right off the bat, then they're probably not going to get as many books in the next years and years afterwards.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I think it's really tough. If a stallion doesn't get off to the right start, it's hard for them to sort of dig themselves out of that hole. And understandably, breeders aren't terribly patient because there's so many of them are commercial breeders. They're trying to make a profit, and if they don't have a hot stallion, they're going to have a hard time generating any income with the offspring. So they have to be pretty discerning. And if a horse gets off to the wrong start, again, as I said, hard to get out of that hole. But we've been very fortunate. And then the other thing we've got, as you kind of alluded to, but that we were pretty proud of the accomplishment of the top 4 in one class, and then now we've got the leading 3rd crop sire in Omaha Beach, the leading 2nd crop sire in Vacoma, the leading freshman sire in Yaupon, and of course the leading general sire and Into Mischief. And somebody who's been around and a historian and as a writer called me and just wanted to get a comment from me on that subject. And his take was that he did not think that had ever happened before, and that it was because of the nature of the way the stats are kept. He wasn't sure. It would be very difficult to verify whether any farm had accomplished that or not. But he seemed relatively confident that it had not been done before. And again, but I think that's something. It goes to ownership. It goes to the team that we've put in place here, and I'm talking about right across the board, from our sales team, our guys that go out and identify these potential stallion prospects that work the deals. Mark Toothaker is really, very much a part of that. Myself, Eric Gustafson, Brian Lyle, Des Dempsey, and even my son now, Daniel Toffey, has stepped into that role to a certain degree, and that's a huge part of it. But the biggest part is the breeders, is our clients, and the job that they do in supporting these stallions and raising good foals and turning out a good product. So the horses have a little something to do with it too, but the job that our breeders do is we're so appreciative of, and without them, none of this is happening. So it's pretty special, but I think it's nice that that's attributed to our name, but it's as much a credit to our breeders as anything else.
We are very lucky to be here with Ned Toffey. A few more questions for the GM of Spendthrift Farm. So where you sit right now, how many stallions do you currently have? How many broodmares do you have now out there?
We've got about 90 mares on the farm, and that's a number that's always in flux, because we'll cull some every year. We'll buy some in the November sales every year. There'll be some fillies that'll run for claims maybe even the odd horse that we'll buy privately. And, we're constantly retiring fillies off the track and making decisions as to whether we keep them and breed them. Do we breed them and sell them, or do we make them at least for the time being, a permanent member of the broodmare band? So, it's that the mare number is always in flux, but it's usually between 80 and 90. We had 21 stallions last year, 29 stallions last year. We'll have 29 again this year. And that does a pretty good job of keeping us out of trouble. So keeps us pretty busy.
About how many horses in training do you have?
Oh, that number is in a constant state of flux as well. But we've got pieces of in the neighborhood of about 60 horses. We just sent probably the largest group we've ever sent down to Ocala. We just sent 42 horses down to Ocala. Some of those are homebreds. Some of those are horses that we bought in partnership. Excited about that group too. But it's a tough game. I mean, 2 years ago, I was really excited about our group coming out of Ocala, and it was sort of conspicuously quiet. And then this year has been one of the best racing years that we've had in a very long time. So, hopefully we can continue that on. But Mr. Hughes, one of his great expressions that I'll never forget is nobody knows when he's talking about this business, whether it's who's going to make the next stallion, which one is going to be the runner, which one's going to make the broodmare. It's nobody knows. And we're reminded of that over and over. He used to joke that one of our advantages that we know we don't know. But that's, you've just got to do the best you can, give yourself a shot to have some success and hope you have some luck along the way.
And for all the details, we can go to spendthriftfarm.com. Wanted to ask you about a couple things before we let you go to these breeder-friendly programs that you guys have been such a big part of. Safe Bet program, Share the Upside program, Breed Secure program. Take a minute, talk to us about some of these programs that you guys have created, that you've been a big part of, and that have just given comfortability and kind of an insurance to these owners out there to let them know that they can be part of the team for a while. Tell us a little bit about these some of these programs that you
the most sort of enduring one has been the Share the Upside. The idea with Share the Upside was that breeders that were supporting a stallion, they would contribute to the stallion's success. And then the stallion would go on and appreciate in value, and then they suddenly weren't able to afford that horse anymore. And so it was also at a time when this was in the neighborhood of kind of the 2008, and things were really tough financially for a lot of breeders. So we were looking at, there was multifaceted. What's a way to get our stallions some more support, a way to help breeders be more successful, and to also get people to stick with a stallion, to patronize them in beyond just year one. And so Mr. Hughes, with the help of all of us here, came up with the program called Share the Upside. And the idea is that if you breed to, and there's been a number of variations of it, but essentially, if you breed to a given stallion in his first and second year at stud, you produce 2 live foals, pay your stud fees in a timely manner. You will then have earned a lifetime breeding right in that stallion. And so you can imagine, remarkably, the first horse we did that was with a horse named Notional. And Notional, about 40 people took us up on that offer and set about trying to earn a breeding right in Notional. And he did not work out as a stallion. The second horse he was in the same crop that we started that with, was Into Mischief. And to tell you the truth, again, a big part of the motivation for this thing was, how are we going to get people to breed to Into Mischief? And so when we started it, it was actually Into Mischief's second year. So we said, you can breed 2 mares this year, or a mare this year to mare in year 3. Wow. because he got such a small book in year one. We said, what are we going to do in year two? It's going to be even tougher. We've got to get him some opportunity, some chance to have some success. And so that's one of the reasons we came up with this program. And fortunately for us, only 15 people took us up on that. And of those 15, only 8 followed through and did everything they needed to do to earn the lifetime breeding right. So,
Wow.
Our finances would look very different if 50 or 60 people had taken us up on that, because that's obviously a piece of the horse that we're giving up, a piece of that income, but it just goes to show you nobody knows.
Wow.
A horse that we're talking about in incredible historic contexts, you could have, for $13,000 in stud fees, you could have earned the right to breed to that horse the rest of his life
Forever.
free. So again, that just shows you how nobody knows. But what we do know is that a stallion can't be successful unless you give him some opportunity. And we were able to do just enough to give Into Mischief an opportunity to be successful, and he took it from there. So the Share the Upside's been a really good program for us. We don't do it on every horse, but we do offer it on a number of horses. And then the safe bet is something that we do. We don't do the breed secure anymore, but we do the safe bet program still, and that is horses that are in their bubble years. If they've got 2-year-olds coming, we will sell them a season, and then the contract says, if this stallion doesn't produce a stakes winner in this crop, you will not owe a stud fee. If he does not produce a stakes winner, you don't owe a stud fee. If he does produce a stakes winner, your stud fee is X. And that's something that a lot of people have taken us up on. And that was something that the idea was, again, we've got to get horses, mares to these horses in their sort of bubble years, so that if they do have some success from the crops they breed in year 1 and 2, they've got at least some opportunity of carrying it on through their subsequent crops. And the idea is that we're gonna share the risk with you. If he doesn't have some success, you don't have to pay us. And so that's been a good program to help get some stallions in a tough year, to get them some additional support. And there's breeders appreciate that. So as Wayne used to say, I mean, breeders are the backbone of the industry, and if we don't have breeders out here being successful, then it doesn't matter who gets all these stallion prospects. We've got to have somebody to breed to them, and so we try to make things, and we try to price our stallions in a way that gives our breeders an opportunity to be successful.
Ned, I feel like we could sit here and I could ask you questions for the next few hours. I really appreciate your time. We know you're a very busy man, and we wish you the best of luck this weekend with the big horses at Keeneland. We wish you the best of luck at the Breeders' Cup with Copian, and hopefully a couple more 2-year-olds to add in the mix there with them. And thanks again for all your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Off the Track podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Amazon, Audible, Spotify, and on YouTube. We'd always love to hear from you in the comments section. Make sure you're tuning in next week for another very special guest.